When the lawyer lifted the last page of Charles Stevens's will, Ella's father stopped pretending not to watch her. Nicholas had already received the clock shop on Central Avenue in Charles's old house. Madison had been given a generous share of the savings. Lisa, Charles's second wife, had her own protected share and enough cash to keep her secure. Ella sat at the far end of the conference table with her hands folded around a paper cup of water. She was the only grandchild in the room. She'd spent more time with Charles than anyone there, but her name hadn't been mentioned once. The lawyer cleared his throat. To my granddaughter, Ella Stevens, I leave the wall-mounted regulator clock from the back room of Stevens Clock and Watch Repair. For a second, nobody spoke. Then Nicholas leaned back in his chair. That old thing? The lawyer looked down at the page. That is the item specified. Madison glanced at her husband, Hunter. He lowered his eyes, but not before Ella saw the small smile he tried to hide. Lisa adjusted the strap of her purse. She wasn't smiling. She looked relieved, which hurt in a different way. Until that moment, she'd been worried Charles might have left Ella something that reduced her own portion. Nicholas rubbed the side of his jaw. Well, that's something, I guess. Ella looked at him. What does that mean? It means it's not even worth the nail it hangs on. Hunter gave a quiet laugh. Madison touched his arm. Don't. What? Hunter said. Nick said it. Nicholas turned toward Ella as though he were trying to help. Your grandfather probably thought you'd want a keepsake. You know how he was about clocks. Ella knew exactly how Charles had been about clocks. A clock wasn't decoration to him. It was a promise that small things, handled carefully, could keep doing their job long after people lost patience with them. But the regulator hadn't worked in years. It had hung in the rear workroom above a cabinet of mainsprings and old watch crystals. Its walnut case had gone dull. The brass pendulum was spotted with age. The hands had stopped at 8 minutes past 4, sometime before Charles's heart condition grew serious. Ella had asked him about it once. He'd looked up from a pocket watch and said, "That one's waiting." For what? For somebody to pay attention. At the lawyer's table, Ella reached for the copy of the will. Does it say anything else? No, the lawyer said. Only the clock. Nicholas watched her face. He'd expected tears or anger, or some question about why he'd been given the building where she'd grown up, while she received something that didn't run. He was ready to explain that businesses belonged with people who understood money. The fact that his hardware store was $85,000 in debt didn't enter the explanation he had prepared. Ella didn't give him the chance. I'll take it. Madison's eyebrows lifted. Right now? As soon as I can get it down. You don't have to, Nicholas said. I'm clearing the back room anyway. Most of that stuff is going to donation or the dump. That clock isn't. It's heavy, Ella. I know. There could be bugs in the case. I know. Hunter looked at Nicholas. If she wants it, let her haul it. Lisa pushed her chair back. Can we finish first? The lawyer continued through the routine language. Ella listened, but the words passed without settling. Funeral expenses, personal effects, remaining accounts, the family house, the shop property. Each item went somewhere sensible, according to everyone in the room. Only the broken clock had gone to her. Charles had died at 71 in the autumn of 2025. The will reading happened on the final afternoon of that year because Hunter had a real estate conference the following week, and Nicholas said the shop couldn't remain in limbo. That was how the family handled grief when there was property involved. They found a date that worked for business. Ella was 26 by then. She should have been old enough not to feel like the quiet person at the edge of the family photograph. Still, as she followed the others into the cold parking lot, she felt exactly that way. Madison and Hunter walked ahead, discussing whether the savings should stay invested. Lisa stood beside her car and searched through her purse for her keys. Nicholas caught up with Ella near the sidewalk. You all right? She looked at him. You knew what was in the will. I knew most of it. How long? A few months, and you didn't tell me. It wasn't my place. That answer came easily to him. Nicholas had spent years finding places where responsibility didn't belong to him. When Ella was growing up, he'd moved from one plan to another. A landscaping company, a vending machine route, a partnership selling refurbished boat motors. Every venture began with printed business cards and ended with late notices on the kitchen counter. After Ella's parents divorced in 2004, Nicholas kept telling everyone the disruption was temporary. Ella would stay with Charles for a week, then 2 weeks, then most afternoons and half the weekends. Charles never announced that he was raising her. He simply made room. At Stephen's clock and watch repair, he kept a wooden stool beside his bench. Ella did homework there while clocks ticked on every wall. When she got hungry, he made cheese sandwiches on waxed paper in the little back room. He cut them into uneven squares because he was careful with gears and careless with bread. He taught her not to touch a watch movement with bare fingers. He taught her the smell of machine oil and old wood. He showed her how to sort screws on a white cloth so one wouldn't roll into a floor crack. Every piece has somewhere it belongs, he'd tell her. What if you don't know where? Then you don't throw it away. You wait until you understand it. Nicholas came through the shop when he needed cash, advice, or a place to complain. He loved his father, though not in a way that made either man comfortable. Charles asked practical questions. Nicholas heard criticism in them. How much do you owe? I've got it handled. When is the rent due? I said, I've got it handled. Then why are you asking me? Their conversations often ended with Nicholas leaving through the front door too hard. 5 minutes later, Charles would check the door frame as if the wood were the thing that had suffered. Madison handled Charles differently. She visited on birthdays and brought gifts that photographed well. She wanted him to close the shop, sell the building, and move somewhere with a golf course and a dining room. Charles always thanked her. Then he went back to work. Ella never had to persuade him to be himself. That was part of what tied them together. Even after she finished school and found a bookkeeping job at a medical supply office, she still stopped by the shop twice a week. She brought coffee for Charles and iced tea for Jonathan Quinn, the apprentice Charles had begun training in 2015. Jonathan had been patient in the way Charles respected. He didn't pretend to know things. He asked once, listened closely, then tried with his own hands. By the time Charles's health began to fail, Jonathan owned a small repair shop of his own. He still came by Central Avenue whenever Charles called about a movement too heavy to lift or a customer too stubborn to satisfy. Charles trusted him around the bench. That meant more than most people understood. In 2024, a doctor told Charles his heart was weakening. He gave the family the news over meatloaf at Lisa's dining table. Madison asked about specialists. Nicholas asked whether Charles had updated the business insurance. Lisa sat very still. Ella watched her grandfather cut one green bean into 3 pieces. What did the doctor actually say? She asked. Charles looked at her. He said, I need to stop behaving like I'm made of spare parts. Nobody laughed. After dinner, Ella followed him onto the back porch. He lowered himself into a metal chair and waited for his breathing to settle. You could slow down, she said. I have slowed down. You opened the shop at 6 this morning. I used to open at 5:30. She gave him a look. Charles smiled, but only for a moment. You worried about me? Yes. Good. Means you're paying attention. He reached into his shirt pocket and took out the shop key he always carried. He turned it between his fingers, then put it away again. There are things a person can't settle by writing names on a page, he said. Ella waited. He looked through the porch screen toward the dark yard. Your father thinks owning something is the same as being able to keep it. Madison thinks value is whatever another person envies. They weren't born thinking that way. Life worked on them some. What are you trying to tell me? That people can love you and still make a mess near you? She leaned against the railing. That sounds like something you should tell them. I have. They thought I was talking about each other. He smiled again, and this time she did too. Ella assumed he was worried about the shop. She believed he wanted Nicholas and Madison to stop circling it before he was gone. If there was more behind his words, Charles didn't say. She didn't know about Central Row Holdings. She didn't know Charles had quietly formed the company in 2010, or that it owned an 8-unit apartment building at 214 Spring Street. She didn't know he'd asked Allison Herrera to manage it 2 years later. She had no reason to imagine that rent checks from people she'd never met had been building a protected future with her name attached. Only Charles and Allison knew the whole plan. By the time the will was read, Charles had carried the secret for 15 years. Ella carried only what she could see. Her grandfather was gone. Her father had the shop. The family had divided the money. She had a dead clock. Nicholas stood with her outside the lawyer's office, waiting for her to answer. Are you all right? He asked again. No. His face tightened. Ella, Dad made the decisions. I didn't. He was my grandfather. I'm aware. I was there every week. You think I wasn't? She could have answered that. She remembered the empty chair at Christmas dinner and the excuses that arrived by text. She remembered Charles driving to Nicholas's hardware store with checks he claimed were loans. She remembered Nicholas missing 2 cardiology appointments because something came up. But Nicholas already looked cornered. When he felt cornered, he fought the nearest person. Ella stepped around him. I'm getting the clock tonight. The shop's mine now. So, unlock it. He stared at her. Then he pulled the keys from his pocket. Central Avenue had nearly emptied by the time they arrived. The winter light had gone flat over the storefronts. Stephen's clock and watch repair looked smaller without the open sign glowing in the window. Nicholas unlocked the front door. The familiar bells gave a weak jingle above them. Inside, the air smelled like dust, brass polish, and the peppermint candies Charles kept beside the register. Ella reached automatically toward the glass jar before remembering it was empty. Nicholas turned on the lights. Several clocks began chiming the hour at slightly different times. One struck first. Another joined halfway through. A small carriage clock added a thin metallic note from the display case. For most of Ella's life, that uneven chorus had meant Charles was nearby. Now, it only filled the room. Nicholas walked behind the counter and began opening drawers. What are you doing? Ella asked. Looking for the back room key. It hangs under the shelf. I know where it hangs. He searched 2 more drawers before checking under the shelf. Ella said nothing. The rear workroom was colder than the front. Charles's bench stood beneath a long, fluorescent light. His magnifying visor remained on the hook where he'd left it. A chipped mug held 3 screwdrivers and a pair of tweezers. The regulator clock hung on the wall above the parts cabinet. Nicholas looked up at it. You still want this? Yes. Jonathan told Dad the movement was seized. Fixing it could cost more than buying a working one. I don't want a working one. That doesn't make sense. I want this one working. Nicholas dragged over a step stool. Ella put a hand on it. Let me? You'll drop it. I used to wind it. That was years ago. So was the last time you did. He looked at her, then stepped aside. Ella climbed carefully. Up close, the clock was in worse shape than she remembered. Dust filled the carved edge above the dial. The glass over the lower case had a pale scratch. One side of the wooden case had pulled slightly from the wall. She opened the lower door and removed the pendulum first. Charles had taught her that. Never move a clock with its pendulum attached. She passed it down to Nicholas. He held it awkwardly by the brass bob. Not there, she said. Hold the rod. He changed his grip. Ella lifted the clock enough to clear the wall bracket. It was heavier than she expected. Nicholas took the lower half while she stepped down. For one brief moment, they carried it together. Then he shifted too quickly and something clicked behind the dial. Ella stopped. What was that? Wood settling. No, it came from the face. Nicholas tilted the clock toward the light. The painted dial seemed straight from where he stood. I don't see anything. Ella did. Along the right edge, the metal plate sat a little farther forward than the left. She pressed it lightly with one finger. It moved. Nicholas was already turning toward the front room. Let's get it into your car before it gets any colder. Ella wrapped the clock in 2 furniture blankets Charles kept in the storage closet. Nicholas carried it outside with her and helped lower it across the back seat of her small sedan. When they finished, he rested one hand on the open door. If you decide you don't want it, call me before you throw it out. I'm not throwing it out. I'm just saying. Why would you want it if it's worthless? Nicholas looked back toward the dark shop. It was Dad's. The answer might have meant more if he hadn't waited until it belonged to her. Ella closed the door. Her apartment was 10 minutes away, in a brick building near Whittington Avenue. She rented the upstairs unit over a retired nurse named June Carter, who watched television loud enough for the dialogue to travel through the floor. Ella left the clock wrapped until June helped her guide it inside. June stood back and examined the case. That's a serious clock. It used to be. What happened to it? It stopped. June nodded as if this were a condition she understood. Most things can be persuaded. They leaned the clock upright against Ella's living room wall. She thanked June and waited until the downstairs door closed. The apartment felt crowded with it there. Ella moved a floor lamp, then a chair, trying to make space. The clock had been built for a high wall and a room larger than hers. Even silent, it seemed to own the corner. She sat on the rug in front of it. The will reading had begun that afternoon. By the time she removed the blankets and found a clean cloth, the year had less than an hour left. She wiped dust from the glass. She cleaned the carved top and the narrow ledge below the dial. When she touched the right side of the clock face, the metal shifted again. This time, a small screw dropped onto the rug. Ella picked it up. The head was scratched. Someone had removed it before and put it back by hand. She took out her phone and called Jonathan. He answered on the fourth ring. "Ella, did I wake you? It's not midnight. Some people sleep before midnight. Not clockmakers. What's wrong?" She looked at the regulator. "I brought Grandpa's clock home." There was a pause. "Your dad let you take it?" "It was left to me." Another pause, longer this time. "That's all he left you?" Ella didn't answer. Jonathan understood. "I'm sorry," he said. "The face is loose." "Loose? How?" "One side moves. A screw fell out." "Don't pull it." "I wasn't going to." "You were thinking about it." She almost smiled. "Maybe. I can look at it tomorrow. The shop's closed. My shop isn't. It's New Year's Day. Clocks don't care." Ella set the phone on speaker and leaned closer. The dial plate had slipped forward enough to cast a thin shadow inside the case. "Jonathan? There's something behind it. Don't force it. I'm not." She angled the floor lamp toward the opening. At first, she saw only dark wood. Then the clock gave a quiet wooden pop. The upper edge of the dial fell forward. Ella caught it with both hands. Behind the face was a shallow space that shouldn't have been there. A folded paper rested inside it, pressed flat against the backboard. She stared at the few typed words visible along the crease. Apartment lease. Below that was a name she'd never heard before. Central Row Holdings. Ella read it twice. "Central Row Holdings," she said. Jonathan's voice changed. "Can you see the rest?" "Not without moving the paper." "Then leave it where it is. It's already right there. And the dial is hanging by the other screws. If it drops, it could tear whatever's behind it." Ella kept one hand beneath the metal face. "What do I do?" "Take pictures first. Every angle you can get." She photographed the fallen screw on the rug, the tilted dial, and the folded paper inside the shallow recess. Then she took a wider picture, showing the whole clock against her living room wall. "Now, find something soft," Jonathan said. "A towel, a shirt, anything." She folded a dish towel into a thick pad and rested it between the dial and the wooden case. It kept the metal from pulling farther forward. Outside, someone set off the first firework of the new year. The sound cracked between the apartment buildings. June's television went quiet downstairs, then came back louder. "I can be there in 20 minutes, Jonathan said. Ella looked at the time on her phone. It was 2 minutes after midnight. "You have to open tomorrow. I said I'd look at it." "No, you said I could bring it to your shop." That was before the face fell off. It didn't fall off. Ella. She understood what he was offering. He'd get dressed, drive across town, carry the clock down her narrow stairs, and spend the first hours of the year protecting whatever Charles had hidden. She also understood why she didn't want him there yet. Once that paper came out, something would change. She didn't know whether it would be large or foolish, but it had been put behind the face on purpose. Charles had covered it with screws. He'd trusted the clock to hold it. Ella needed to decide what she was doing before anybody else decided for her. "Tomorrow morning," she said, "at your shop." "You're sure?" "Yes. Don't call your father." She hadn't planned to, but the warning made her sit straighter. "Why would I?" "Because he owns the old shop now, and that clock came out of it tonight. The clock is mine." "I know." "Keep it that simple until we know what the paper is." Ella looked at the words through the narrow opening. "Do you recognize the company?" "No." "What about Spring Street?" "You can see an address?" "Part of one. 214 Spring Street." Jonathan went quiet. "Do you know it?" she asked. "I know where Spring Street is, that's all." It wasn't quite all. Jonathan had driven Charles through that part of town several times, usually when the older man claimed he needed lunch from a diner that wasn't close to either shop. Charles sometimes asked him to slow down near the older brick buildings. Jonathan had assumed he was watching traffic or looking at storefront clocks. Now he wondered what else Charles had been watching. "I'll be at the shop by 8, he said. "Bring the screw and something it can't fall out of." Ella found a small envelope in her desk. She placed the screw inside, sealed it, and wrote the time on the front. That was the first choice she made after the will. She didn't call Nicholas. She didn't tell Madison. She didn't send a photograph to Lisa or ask the family lawyer whether a folded paper inside a clock belonged to the person who inherited the clock. She made a record, she protected what she'd found. Then she stayed beside it. Ella slept on the couch with the living room lamp on. At 7:30, June helped her carry the regulator downstairs. The dial was still supported by the folded towel. They moved slowly, one step at a time. "You find something in there?" June asked. "Maybe. Good something? I don't know yet." June tightened her grip beneath the case. "Then don't name it before you meet it." Jonathan's shop occupied a narrow storefront near Ouachita Avenue. The sign above the window read, "Quinn Clock Repair," in plain gold letters. He'd painted it himself after rejecting 3 designs that made his name look like a law firm. The front room held customer clocks along 2 walls. Small alarm clocks sat in labeled trays behind the counter. A row of tall cases stood near the window, each with a paper tag hanging from its key. Jonathan unlocked the door before Ella reached it. He wore an old gray sweatshirt and work trousers. His hair was still damp from the shower. A half-eaten biscuit rested on a napkin beside the register. "You came early," he said. "So did you. I own the place. I'm allowed to make bad decisions here." He took the lower end of the clock while Ella held the top. Together they carried it through the front room and placed it on a padded bench in the workshop. Jonathan had obligations waiting for him. A brass carriage clock had to be finished before noon for a customer leaving town. A church office was expecting an estimate on a tower clock controller. 3 voicemail messages blinked on the phone. He listened to each message before touching Charles's regulator. Ella stood with her coat still on. "You said 8, and it's 7:52. There's a paper behind the dial. It'll still be there after I return a phone call." She watched him call the church secretary and explain that he needed another day. His voice was calm. He didn't use Charles's clock as an excuse. He only said the inspection had taken longer than expected. When he hung up, Ella said, "You learned that from Grandpa." "Learned what?" "How to disappoint people so they thank you." He said a true delivery date costs less than an apology. Jonathan removed his sweatshirt and hung it on a chair. Underneath, he wore a dark work shirt with the sleeves already rolled. "Show me the screw." Ella gave him the envelope. He poured the screw onto a white cloth and examined it through a magnifier. "This isn't original." "How can you tell?" "The head's wrong. It's also newer than the other 3. "How much newer?" "I can't date a screw by looking at it." "You said it was newer." "That's different from knowing when somebody put it there." He carried the envelope and cloth to the clock. First, he photographed everything again under brighter light. Then he checked the remaining dial screws without loosening them. The plate didn't warp, he said. It was reset crooked. Could Grandpa have done that by accident? He could have. He didn't. "You sound certain." "I watched him spend 40 minutes straightening a label inside a case where no customer would ever see it." Ella remembered that. Charles hated crooked labels because they suggested someone had rushed at the easiest part. Jonathan opened the lower door and inspected the stopped movement through the side of the case. He tried no force. He placed one finger against a wheel, tested the resistance, and withdrew it. The movement ceased. "Can you fix it?" "Probably. It needs to come apart first." "How long?" "A proper cleaning, new suspension spring, whatever else I find. Maybe a week." "I thought you could just oil it." "That's what people say right before they make an expensive problem worse." Ella took off her coat and set it over the chair. "What do you need me to do?" "Nothing yet." "You're not doing this while I stand here?" Jonathan looked at the crowded bench behind him. "Clear that corner. Put the tools in the shallow drawer, tags facing up. Don't mix the trays." Ella began moving things. The work settled her. Tweezers went beside small pliers. Screwdrivers rested in fitted slots. Customer tags stayed with their cases. Charles had arranged his bench differently, but the logic was the same. Nothing was put down without a reason. Jonathan secured the clock case in a padded support. He removed the hands, starting with the minute hand, then the hour hand. Each piece went into its own tray. When he reached for the first dial screw, Ella moved beside him. "Ready?" he asked. "No." Good answer. He loosened the lower left screw. The upper left came next. He supported the dial while removing the last screw on the right. The metal face lifted away. Behind it, Charles had cut a neat, rectangular recess into the wooden board. The edges were smooth and sealed. The space was too precise to be damaged and too shallow to serve any part of the clock. Jonathan held the dial beneath the bench light. "This was made for paper," he said. Ella saw 4 faint pencil marks on the wood. Charles had used them to square the recess before cutting it. One mark extended a little too far, then had been sanded down. The folded document rested inside with a smaller piece of paper tucked behind it. Jonathan reached for clean cotton gloves. "Why gloves?" Ella asked. "Because you're going to want the paper to look the way it looked when we found it." That answer told her he was taking the discovery seriously. He lifted the folded document and placed it on the cleared bench. Then he removed the smaller paper. It was a note, folded once. Ella recognized the cream stationery from Charles's desk. He used it for repair estimates when a customer wanted something more formal than a carbon copy. Her name wasn't on the outside. Jonathan moved back. "You open it." Ella put on the second pair of gloves. The first document was an apartment lease dated March of 2015. It covered a 1-bedroom unit at 214 Spring Street. The tenant's name was Audrey Lane. The landlord was Central Row Holdings, a limited liability company. A line at the bottom listed Allison Herrera as property manager. Ella read the name aloud. Jonathan looked over her shoulder. "Your grandfather's friend Allison? How many Allison Herreras do you think he knew?" "I'm not guessing today." Ella checked every page. The lease had expired years ago. Charles's name appeared nowhere on it. There was no reference to Stephen's clock and watch repair, no signature she recognized, and no explanation for why an old apartment contract had been sealed behind the clock face. She unfolded the smaller note. Charles had written one sentence. "Ask Allison what the clock has always kept safe." Jonathan leaned closer. "That's his handwriting," he said. Ella knew it too. Charles made his capital A with a narrow top. The last letter of a word often dropped below the line when he was tired. She turned the note over. The back was blank. "What does it mean?" Jonathan asked. "I don't know." "Did he ever talk to you about an apartment building?" "No." "Did Allison?" "No." Jonathan picked up the lease and examined the signatures. Allison signed as manager, so she knew this company, at least in 2015. Ella took out her phone. She found the Arkansas Business Registry and typed in the name. The search returned one active company. Central Row Holdings had been formed in 2010. Its mailing address wasn't the building on Spring Street. It was a post office box Ella didn't recognize. The registered agent was a small local office service. No familiar family name appeared on the first screen. Jonathan rolled his chair toward the computer at the other end of the bench. "Try the county property records." The county assessor's website took several attempts to load. Ella searched the street address. A parcel appeared. The owner was Central Row Holdings. The property description listed an 8-unit residential building and a small manager's office. The transfer date went back to 2010. Ella compared the date to the company record. Same year. "That confirms the company owns the address," Jonathan said. "It doesn't tell us why Charles had the lease. Or why he hid it. No." Jonathan kept his tone careful. He didn't want hope to run ahead of proof. Charles had taught him that too. A clock that ticked on the bench wasn't repaired until it kept time for several days. Ella printed both pages from the computer. She placed them beside the lease, the note, and the envelope holding the screw. "Can we go there?" she asked. "I have a customer coming at noon. It's not 9 yet. I also have work. I'm not asking you to take the day off." Jonathan looked at her. She waited. He covered the exposed clock movement with a clean cloth. 30 minutes, he said. 214 Spring Street stood less than 10 minutes away. It was a 2-story brick building set back from the road behind a strip of winter grass. 4 apartments opened from the lower walkway. 4 more faced the upper balcony, reached by metal stairs on either side. The brick needed cleaning. One gutter sagged near the corner. The white trim had been patched in 2 slightly different shades. Still, the place was cared for. The walkway had been swept. New weather stripping showed around 2 doors. Someone had arranged 3 pots of rosemary near the manager's office. Ella parked across the street. Neither she nor Jonathan got out at first. "This is real," she said. "The building is." A delivery driver carried 2 grocery bags up the left staircase. A woman came out of a lower apartment with a laundry basket and nodded to him. Nothing about the place looked hidden. People lived there. They opened doors, accepted groceries, and set damp towels over balcony rails. Ella had passed Spring Street hundreds of times. She might have passed this building with Charles in the car. She couldn't remember. Jonathan pointed toward a small sign beside the office door. Central Row Apartments. Below it, in smaller letters, was a telephone number for the manager. Ella called it. They watched the office window while the phone rang. Nobody answered. A recorded voice began. "You've reached Allison Herrera at Central Row. Please leave your name, number, and the unit you're calling about." Ella ended the call before the beep. Jonathan looked at her. Small enough confirmation? It was. The lease wasn't a random scrap. The company existed. It owned the building. Allison had managed it when the lease was signed, and she still managed it now. Ella opened the car door. "What are you doing? I want to look at the sign. You can see it from here. I want to see it up close." They crossed the street. Near the office door, a locked display case held emergency numbers and printed notices. One announced a plumbing inspection. Another reminded tenants that rent was due on the first business day of the month. At the bottom was a typed message. All management questions should be directed to Allison Herrera. Ella touched the edge of Charles's note through the envelope in her coat pocket. She remembered the casserole dish sitting on her kitchen counter. Allison had brought food to Lisa's house after the funeral. When Ella tried to return the empty dish, Allison had told her there was no hurry. "Bring it when things settle," she'd said. At the time, Ella believed she meant the funeral. Now she wasn't sure. Jonathan checked the time. "I need to get back." Ella nodded. "I'm going to Allison's. With the lease?" "With the lease and the note. Make copies first." They returned to his shop. Jonathan scanned every page and saved the photographs in 2 separate folders. Ella put the originals into a flat document sleeve. Before leaving, she stood beside the regulator clock. Its dial rested face up on a padded tray. Without it, the clock looked open and unfinished. "Can you still repair it?" she asked. "The hiding place doesn't affect the movement." "That's not what I meant." Jonathan understood. "Yes, I can still repair it." Ella went home for the casserole dish. Allison lived in a small yellow house near the edge of town. A metal heron stood in the flower bed beside her porch. Ella had seen it at every visit since she was young, though she'd never understood why anyone wanted a bird made from garden tools. She carried the dish in one hand and the document sleeve beneath her coat. Allison opened the door before Ella knocked twice. Her eyes went first to the casserole dish. Then they moved to Ella's coat, where the square corner of the sleeve showed near the buttons. Allison stopped breathing for just a moment. Ella saw it. "I found something in Grandpa's clock," she said. Allison kept one hand on the door. "What did you find?" "An old lease." The color changed in Allison's face. Ella took out Charles's note and held it where she could see the handwriting. "He told me to ask you what the clock has always kept safe." Allison looked past Ella toward the street. Then she opened the door wider. "Bring everything inside," she said. Allison closed it behind her and turned the deadbolt. The house smelled of coffee and furniture polish. A basket of clean towels sat on the sofa, half folded. Allison moved it to a chair and pointed Ella toward the dining table. "Put the dish in the kitchen." Ella set it beside the sink. When she returned, Allison had taken a pair of reading glasses from a drawer. "Let me see the lease first." Ella placed the document sleeve on the table. Allison slid the lease out carefully. She read the first page, checked the signatures, then turned to the final page. Her own name appeared above the date. "You signed it," Ella said. "I signed hundreds of these." "For Grandpa?" Allison removed her glasses. Charles owned the building. The answer was direct. Ella still needed a moment to accept it. All of it, the building and the land beneath it. He bought it through Central Row Holdings in 2010. Why didn't anybody know? "I knew. That isn't what I meant. I know what you meant." Allison returned the lease to the sleeve. She seemed to be arranging her thoughts with the same care. "Your grandfather didn't want the property connected to the shop or the family house. Central Row had its own accounts, its own tax returns, and its own insurance. I handled the tenants. Charles handled the larger expenses. Where did he get the money to buy an apartment building? From years of fixing clocks while everyone told him the shop wasn't making enough." Ella sat across from her. Charles had never lived like a man saving toward a second property. He drove the same truck until the driver's seat split. He repaired the house furnace with used parts. When Madison tried to buy him a new television, he asked whether hers had stopped working. "How much did it cost?" Ella asked. "He never told me the exact amount." What's it worth? I don't know today's value. Did Lisa know? No. Nicholas? No. Madison? No. Ella looked at the folded note. And you kept it secret. I managed a building. I didn't advertise a client's business. He was your friend. Yes, that's different. It became different. Allison's phone rang from the kitchen. She glanced toward it but didn't move. What did he ask you to do? Ella said. The ringing stopped. In 2023, Charles came here with that clock note already written. He sat where you're sitting. He told me he'd put a leash somewhere his family wouldn't look. Inside the clock. He didn't tell me where inside it. What exactly did he say? Allison's eyes moved to the note. He said, if someone comes to you because the clock sent them, help that person finish what I started. Ella felt the room become too quiet. Someone? That was his word. He didn't say me? Not that day. Did you ask who? Of course I did. What did he say? He said I'd know when the person arrived. Ella pushed her chair back a few inches. That sounds like him making you responsible for a guessing game. I told him the same thing. What was his answer? That he wasn't asking me to guess. He was asking me to wait. Allison's phone rang again. This time she stood. I need to answer. That number only calls twice when something's wrong. She picked up in the kitchen. Central Row, this is Allison. Ella heard a woman speaking quickly through the phone. Slow down, Carol. Where is the water coming from? Allison reached for a pen. Is it running down the wall or dripping from the ceiling? She wrote an apartment number on the back of an envelope. Move anything plugged in. Don't touch the outlet. I'm on my way. She hung up and took a ring of keys from a hook beside the refrigerator. Pipe? Ella asked. Maybe. There's water in the downstairs hallway. I'll come. You don't have to. I know. Allison studied her for a second, then grabbed a canvas tool bag from the coat closet. Follow me. Don't block the rear drive. At Central Row, a woman in slippers waited outside apartment 2 with a bath towel over one shoulder. Water had spread across the concrete walkway and collected near the bottom stair. It started by the light, Carol said. I heard it before I saw it. Allison went inside. Ella followed. The apartment was warm and smelled like cinnamon air freshener. 2 lamps had been unplugged and placed on the kitchen counter. Water ran in a narrow line down the wall near the living room window. Allison touched the damp drywall. This isn't a supply pipe. It's coming from above. She stepped back outside and looked up at the balcony. A man from the apartment overhead leaned over the railing. My washing machine's off, he said. Did you run it this morning? 1 load. Allison climbed the stairs. Ella went with her. They found water beneath the washing machine, where a drain hose had worked loose from the wall connection. The machine had emptied part of its cycle onto the floor. Allison shut off both valves. Get every towel you've got, she told the tenant. We need to dry this before it finds another way down. For the next 40 minutes, Ella carried wet towels to the bathtub, while Allison called a plumber. Carol stayed downstairs moving books and framed photographs away from the damp wall. Nobody treated the leak like an investment problem. It was Carol's living room. It was a ceiling that needed drying before mold started. It was a plumber charging a holiday rate and a washing machine that couldn't be used until the drain was secured. When the plumber arrived, Allison met him beside the office. You're charging double? She asked. Holiday call. You were already 3 streets away. It's still a holiday. Then charge me time and a half. The plumber looked toward the upper apartment. Charles always paid the invoice. Charles isn't here. The man's expression softened. I heard. I'm sorry. Thank you. Time and a half. He sighed. All right. Allison unlocked the manager's office. The room held a metal desk, 2 filing cabinets, a small refrigerator, and a wall calendar still turned to December. A shelf near the ceiling carried spare smoke detectors and boxes of air filters. Ella remained by the door. Come in, Allison said. You're already wet. A dark wooden drawer had been built beneath the desk. It didn't match the metal frame. A small brass lock sat at its center. Ella noticed Allison looking at it. What's in there? Something Charles left. The rest of the answer? Maybe. You haven't opened it? No. Why not? He told me not to. The plumber called from the hallway before Ella could ask more. Allison locked the office again and went upstairs. Ella stood beneath the balcony while he replaced the drain connection. She watched water drip from the edge of a towel Carol had pushed against her wall. The building didn't feel like a hidden fortune. It felt like 8 front doors, each with someone's shoes beside it. One had a folding chair near the entrance. Another had a wind chime made from old silverware. A delivery menu was held to an upstairs door with a magnet shaped like a strawberry. Charles had known these details. He must have known which units had weak faucets and which tenants paid on Fridays. He'd been carrying that life alongside the shop, yet he'd never mentioned it to Ella. When the plumber finished, Allison wrote a check from the Central Row account. He looked at it. Still good? It was good last week. I heard about Charles. The company didn't die with him. The words landed hard enough that Ella looked at her. Allison handed over the check. Deposit it Tuesday. After he left, Carol came outside. Will the wall have to come down? Not all of it, Allison said. I'll bring a moisture meter tomorrow. If the insulation's wet, we'll open a section. How much mess? I won't know until I check. Carol nodded, worried but satisfied that somebody had answered. Ella helped Allison roll the wet towels into a plastic tub. What happens to this place now? She asked. That's one of the things we need to find out. You said the company didn't die with him. It didn't. A company is separate from a person. Then who owns it now? Allison pressed the lid onto the tub. Charles believed that was settled. Do you know how? I know where he said the papers would be. In that drawer. Yes. Then why didn't he give you the key? He did. Allison touched the ring in her coat pocket. Ella waited. I was supposed to open it with the person who brought the note, Allison said. But before we do that, I want to make sure the records Charles relied on are still where he left them. What records? The company bank account, property tax records, insurance. If anything changed after his death, we need to know before we open a drawer and start believing paper. Ella thought of Jonathan saying nearly the same thing about a clock ticking on the bench. What do we do first? We go to the bank. The bank lobby was nearly empty. A plastic sign near the entrance wished customers a happy new year. One teller worked behind the counter, while another sorted deposit slips. Allison asked for the business account representative. A woman named Janice came from a side office and greeted Allison by name. Then she recognized Ella. I'm so sorry about Charles, she said. He was always kind to us. Thank you, Ella said. Allison placed the Central Row checkbook on the desk. I need to confirm the operating account is still active and that my signing authority hasn't changed. Janice glanced at Ella. And she is? She's with me. I can only discuss the account with an authorized signer, then discuss it with me. Ella stayed in the chair but turned slightly away while Janice checked the computer. The account was active. Regular rent deposits had been made. Automatic payments for insurance and utilities were still clearing. Janice lowered her voice. We do need updated documents because Mr. Stevens is listed as the company's controlling member. I expected that. Do you have succession paperwork? Not with me. Until we have it, you can keep handling normal expenses. Anything unusual may need review. What counts as unusual? A large withdrawal, change of signer, property sale, or loan request. Allison nodded. Ella spoke before Janice could close the file. Can you tell us whether anyone else asked about the company after Charles died? Janice looked at Allison. You can answer her, Allison said. No one has contacted us through the account, Janice said. That's all I can confirm. It wasn't much, but it meant Nicholas and Madison hadn't found the company through the bank. Not yet. Outside, Allison put the checkbook into her bag. We'll open the drawer tomorrow morning, she said. Why tomorrow? Because I have to check Carol's wall again, and you need to bring Jonathan. Why Jonathan? Charles trusted him with the clock. If those papers ever have to be explained, I want someone else who saw where the first clue came from. Ella agreed. She drove home with the lease and note still inside her coat. Lisa's car was parked beside the curb. She stood beneath the apartment awning, holding a paper shopping bag. Her hair had been flattened by the damp air. When Ella pulled in, Lisa gave a small wave. I brought some of your grandfather's things, she said. Ella unlocked the upstairs door. Lisa entered and set the bag on the kitchen counter. Inside were 2 work shirts, a leather belt, and Charles's peppermint jar from the shop. I thought you might want these. Thank you. Lisa looked toward the empty place where the clock had rested the night before. You took it somewhere? Jonathan's repairing it. That may cost a lot. I'll handle it. Lisa ran one finger along the rim of the peppermint jar. Janice from the bank called me this morning. Ella said nothing. She was checking an address for some estate paperwork. She mentioned you'd been in asking about Spring Street. I didn't ask her about an address. She said you were there with Allison. That's different. Lisa folded her gloves together. Did you find something in the clock? The question was too exact to soften. Ella closed the kitchen drawer she'd been holding open. What makes you think there was something to find? Charles didn't do things without a reason. Everybody seemed sure the clock was junk yesterday. I never called it junk. You didn't object. Lisa looked tired then, not guilty. She had spent months fearing that illness would leave her without enough. Charles had kept accounts she didn't understand, and secrets she'd learned not to ask about. I'm not trying to take anything from you, she said. What are you trying to do? Make sure nothing changes what the will gave me. I don't know enough to answer that. Then let the estate lawyers see whatever you found. No? Lisa's mouth tightened. Ella, hidden papers can cause trouble. They were hidden in something Charles left to me. That doesn't mean everything inside it belongs to you. Maybe not. The answer unsettled Lisa more than an argument would have. Ella walked her to the door. Lisa paused on the landing. Will you tell your father? When I know what there is to tell. Lisa nodded, but she didn't promise the same. From her car, she called Nicholas. Ella found papers in the clock, she said. Nicholas stopped stacking clearance boxes in the hardware store aisle. What kind of papers? Something connected to property on Spring Street. For the first time since the will reading, the broken clock sounded valuable to him. He left the boxes in the aisle and walked into the stockroom. Where on Spring Street? He asked. I don't know, Lisa said. You said property. That's what it sounded like. What did Ella tell you? Almost nothing. She said she doesn't know whether it affects the estate. Nicholas lowered his voice, though the store was nearly empty. Did you see the papers? No. Then why did you call me? Because you're her father. Lisa regretted the answer as soon as she heard his silence. Nicholas didn't. I'll take care of it, he said. That isn't what I asked. What did you ask? Lisa looked through her windshield at Ella's upstairs window. I asked you not to make this worse. Nicholas ended the call without promising anything. He tried Ella twice that evening. The first call went unanswered. The second came while she was heating soup. She watched his name on the screen until the phone stopped. A minute later, he sent a message. Heard you found something of Dad's. Call me. No need to involve strangers until we understand it. Ella read the message, then placed the phone face down. Jonathan wasn't a stranger. Allison wasn't either. Nicholas had known both of them for years. He meant anyone who might understand the papers before he did. The next morning, Ella reached Jonathan's shop while he was fitting the clean carriage clock movement back into its brass case. You're late, he said. It's 7:40. I've been here since 6. That sounds like your problem. It usually is. He tested the winding key, then checked the small clock against a digital timer. On the other bench, Charles's regulator lay open beneath a protective cloth. Ella removed her coat. Did you work on it? I removed the movement last night. The oil had turned to paste in 2 pivot holes. One bushing is worn through. Is that bad? It's fixable. Jonathan showed her the movement under the bench light. Without the dial and case, it looked smaller than the clock deserved. Brass wheels sat between 2 rectangular plates. Dust had gathered around the winding arbor. Charles worked on this before, he said. How can you tell? He replaced one bushing and left the other. That means he knew the wear was uneven. Why didn't he finish? Maybe his hands were bothering him. Maybe his heart was worse. Maybe stopping the movement made it safer to hide paper behind the dial. Ella looked at him. You think he stopped it on purpose? I think we shouldn't decide yet. He covered the movement again and reached for his coat. Allison waited for them outside Central Row. She'd already checked the damaged wall. A small square of drywall had been removed, and a drying fan hummed inside Carol's apartment. The insulation was wet, Allison said. The repair estimate comes this afternoon. She unlocked the manager's office. Jonathan paused near the door, taking in the filing cabinets and the dark drawer beneath the desk. He built that, he said. You recognize it? Ella asked. I recognize the way he set the corners. Allison closed the blinds. You both need to understand something before I open it. Charles made me promise I'd give what's inside to the person who came with the clock note. He didn't ask me to judge whether that person deserved it. That sounds easy, Jonathan said. It isn't. Charles knew I'd worry. About what? About being the only living person who could say he meant any of it. Ella stood beside the desk. You won't be the only person once we see the papers. If the papers say what he told me they said. Allison removed a small brass key from her ring. She inserted it into the lock and turned. The drawer opened 2 inches, then caught. Jonathan crouched. Wood swelled. "Can you get it open?" Allison asked. "Probably. Don't pull." He took a thin, flat tool from his bag and worked it along the upper edge. The drawer shifted a fraction. He moved the tool to the other side and lifted gently. The wood released with a dry scrape. Inside sat a gray metal document box. Allison lifted it onto the desk. The box wasn't locked. A strip of masking tape had been placed across the lid. Charles had written 3 words on it, "For the clock keeper." Ella touched the handwriting, but didn't break the tape. "Did he bring this here in 2023? She asked. "Yes. Late September." "Was he alone?" "Yes." "What did he tell you was inside?" "Proof that Central Row would go where he intended." "Did he say where that was?" Allison looked at her. "He said it wouldn't go to Nicholas or Madison." The room held the sound of the drying fan through the wall. Ella peeled back the tape. Several folders filled the box. Each one had a typed label. The first read, "Recorded Deed." The second read, "Central Row Holdings Operating Agreement." A third read, "Charles Stevens, Central Row Trust." Beneath them lay a sealed envelope with Ella's full name written across the front. Her fingers stopped there. Jonathan moved closer to the desk, but didn't touch anything. "Start with the deed," he said. Ella opened the first folder. The paper was a certified copy from county records. It showed Central Row Holdings as the owner of the land and 8-unit apartment building at 214 Spring Street. A recording stamp marked the transfer in 2010. Allison pointed to the legal description. That matches the tax notices. Ella turned through the following pages. There was a title policy, a survey, and an old inspection report. Charles's personal name appeared only where he'd signed for the company. The operating agreement was longer. Ella tried to read the first page and lost track halfway through the second paragraph. "What does this part mean?" she asked. Allison adjusted her glasses. "I'm not a lawyer." Jonathan leaned over without pretending to understand. "Find the names," he said. They worked through the document until Ella reached an amendment dated in 2023. Charles's name appeared near the top. Below it was hers. "Ella Stevens, sole successor member." She read the line again. "What is a successor member?" "Keep going," Allison said. The next paragraph said that upon Charles's death, his entire membership interest in Central Row Holdings would be held and transferred according to the separate Central Row Trust. It named no alternate successor. Nicholas and Madison appeared nowhere. Ella sat in the metal desk chair. "My name is in the company agreement." "Yes," Allison said. "Did you know?" "I knew he intended it. I didn't see this document." Jonathan checked the signature page. Charles had signed before a notary. 2 witnesses had signed below him. A law office stamp showed the date. Ella opened the trust folder. The first page carried the same date as the company amendment. It identified Charles as the person creating the trust and named the trust as the holder of his entire ownership interest in Central Row Holdings. Ella's name appeared as successor trustee and sole beneficiary after his death. "Beneficiary?" she said. "That means the income?" "It can mean more than that," Allison said. "We need a lawyer." The next page was written in simpler language. The building wasn't part of Charles's general estate. The company interest had been placed in the trust while he was alive. When he died, control was to pass to Ella, subject to confirmation that she accepted the responsibility. Ella turned to Allison. "Accepted what responsibility?" "The property, the company, whatever the trust requires." "Did Grandpa think I'd know how to run an apartment building?" "He thought you'd learn before pretending you did." That sounded enough like Charles that Ella looked down. The trust included instructions to keep a reasonable repair reserve, maintain proper insurance, and honor existing leases. It allowed Ella to sell, refinance, or keep the property once she became successor trustee. It didn't force her to remain a landlord. A bank statement in the folder showed a reserve account. The balance was enough to cover the damaged wall and far more, but it wasn't a fortune someone could simply withdraw. It belonged to the company and paid the building's expenses. Ella returned to the page with her name. Yesterday morning, she'd thought the clock might contain a forgotten lease. By afternoon, she knew Charles had owned a building nobody in the family had heard about. Now, the papers said he had separated that building from everything discussed at the will reading. He hadn't forgotten Ella. He'd placed her outside the argument before anyone knew there would be one. She didn't yet understand why. The sealed envelope remained at the bottom of the box. Ella lifted it. The back had been closed with ordinary glue and one strip of clear tape. Charles had written a smaller instruction beneath her name. Read after the records are verified. Jonathan read it over her shoulder. He expected a challenge, Ella said. Or he expected you to be careful. Allison opened the final folder. It contained recent tax receipts, insurance policies, company filings, and a list of professionals Charles trusted. One name was circled. Kelsey Phillips, estate and property attorney. A telephone number was written beside it. Ella knew the name. Kelsey had represented a co-worker in a dispute over her mother's house. She hadn't handled Charles's general will, and as far as Ella knew, she had no connection to Nicholas or Madison. Allison tapped the card. Charles told me to call her if there was a problem after he died. Did you? No. Until the clock note appeared, I didn't know whether these papers were meant to be used. Jonathan took photographs of every folder as Ella removed it. Allison wrote the time and date on a sheet from the office printer. All three signed below the list of contents. It wasn't something Charles had specifically ordered. It was something careful people did when they knew others might later disagree about what had been found. A car door closed outside. Allison moved toward the blinds. Nicholas stood beside Ella's sedan. How did he know we were here? Ella asked. Lisa told him. Spring Street, Allison said. There are a lot of buildings on Spring Street, not if he searched the company name. Ella replaced the papers in the box, except for the trust folder and the sealed letter. She slid those into her document sleeve. Nicholas knocked on the office door. Allison didn't open it. Ella, he called. I can see your car. Jonathan looked at her. Your choice? Ella carried the sleeve against her chest and stepped outside. Allison and Jonathan followed. Nicholas glanced at both of them. So, this is a meeting now? We had business, Ella said. What kind? Private. I'm your father. That isn't a kind of business. He looked toward the building, counting the doors without seeming to. Lisa said Dad owned this place. Why don't you ask Lisa what I told her? She's worried about her inheritance. We all have questions. You didn't ask questions when I got the clock. Nicholas lowered his voice. If Dad hid an asset, it may have to go through probate. It wasn't hidden from the county. You know what I mean. I know what you're hoping. His face changed. Jonathan shifted beside the office door. He didn't step between them, but Nicholas noticed he was there. I'm not trying to fight with you, Nicholas said. If this property is tied to the family, we need someone who understands how to handle it. I'm calling a lawyer. Which lawyer? Kelsey Phillips. Nicholas knew enough local names to recognize that she wasn't the lawyer who'd read Charles's will. Before you do that, let me look at the papers. No, I can save you money. No, you don't even know what you found. That's why I'm taking it to someone who does. Nicholas glanced at the damp patch outside Carol's door, and the plumber's van still parked near the rear drive. This place could be a liability. Old wiring, old pipes, tenants who won't leave. If Dad put your name on something, you shouldn't rush into it. A day earlier, he'd been worried the papers belonged to the estate. Now he was warning her the building might be worthless. What do you want? Ella asked. I want to help. How? Let me handle the property. If there's a legal way to sell it, I know people. You own a hardware store. I know real estate people. Hunter. And others. Nicholas took a breath and softened his voice. If this really came to you, I could manage a sale. 10% for the work, and the rest would be yours. Allison looked at him. 10%? That's between me and my daughter. Ella held the sleeve tighter. You called it a liability 30 seconds ago, which is why you need help. I haven't decided to sell anything. Nicholas stared at the building again. He had already decided what his share could fix. Supplier invoices, the line of credit, the 2 months of payroll he'd been covering with one card while paying another. Ella saw only the speed of his interest. I'll call you after I speak to Kelsey, she said. You'll call me before you sign anything. That isn't your decision. Nicholas stepped back as though she'd pushed him. He left without saying goodbye. Kelsey agreed to meet that afternoon. Her office was above a pharmacy near the courthouse. She read the operating agreement once, then read the trust twice. She didn't open Charles's sealed letter. When she finished, she placed both palms flat on her desk. These are copies, correct? The trust folder contains originals. The deed is certified. I'll compare everything with the county records and the state company filings. I'll also check the notary and witness information. Do they look real? They look properly prepared. What does that mean for the will? Kelsey turned the trust toward Ella and pointed to the line naming her. If these documents hold up, the apartment building never entered the probate estate. Charles transferred his company interest into this trust before he died. So, the will didn't leave me the building. No. Ella looked at the papers that had waited inside a locked drawer while her family divided everything else. Kelsey spoke gently. The will left you the clock. The clock led you to property that had already been set aside for you. Ella kept looking at the line. Why would he do it this way? Kelsey closed the folder. That answer won't be in the deed. The letter. Maybe. But Charles asked you to wait until the records were verified. How long will that take? A few days if the county files are complete. Longer if I have to chase old signatures. Ella nodded. Kelsey made copies and placed the originals in a fireproof cabinet. She gave Ella a receipt listing every document. Don't give anyone access to the originals, she said. Don't agree to a sale, management arrangement, loan, or inspection. My father offered to sell it for me. How generous was his fee? 10%. Kelsey's expression didn't change, but she wrote something on her legal pad. Did you agree? No. Good. Until I finish checking, you own no certainty. That's different from owning nothing. Ella left with the sealed letter still unread. At Jonathan's shop, the regulator movement had been taken down to its separate wheels and plates. Jonathan sat beneath the bench lamp, polishing a pivot with a strip of fine abrasive. Ella placed Kelsey's receipt beside him. She thinks the trust may hold up. May? She has to verify it. Jonathan turned the brass wheel between his fingers. That's what careful people say before they know. I'm getting tired of careful people. I can become reckless if that helps. How? I'll oil the clock without cleaning it. Ella pulled over a stool. Don't. Then careful still has a purpose. He showed her the worn bushing. The hole that should have held the pivot snugly had become slightly oval. This is why the hand stopped, he said. The wheel leaned just enough to bind. Can I help? You can cut a new paper gasket for the dial plate. He gave her a sheet of thin acid-free paper and the old gasket as a pattern. Ella traced the shape while Jonathan worked. After a few minutes, he said, Did Nicholas call again? 3 times. You answering? I will. When? When I can listen without agreeing, just to make him stop. Jonathan nodded. Charles had once said Ella's greatest strength and worst habit were the same thing. She could tolerate discomfort longer than most people. That made her steady at a workbench. It made her stay too long in conversations where someone else kept moving the line. Her phone rang before she finished the gasket. Nicholas. Ella set down the pencil and answered. What? I need you to come by the store. Why? I want to show you something. If it's about Central Row, talk to Kelsey. It's about me. That stopped her. Nicholas's hardware store stood in a shopping center west of downtown. 2 letters in the illuminated sign had gone dark. A row of outdoor grills sat near the entrance under plastic covers, faded by the sun. Inside, Nicholas waited behind the service counter. The store was open, but no customers were in the aisles. One employee stocked paint rollers near the back. Nicholas led Ella into the small office. Receipts covered one corner of the desk. A paper calendar still showed the previous month. He closed the door. I don't want you hearing this from somebody else. Hearing what? He took a folder from the desk drawer. The first page was a statement from a commercial lender. The balance due was $85,000. Ella checked the name twice. This is yours? The store's. You signed for it. I had to. When? Some of it goes back to when I took over in 2019. Some is newer. Nicholas sat down. The previous owner made the numbers look better than they were. Then supplier costs went up. Every time I got close, something else hit. Does Grandpa's shop owe any of this? No. His house? No. Then why are you showing me? Because I'm trying to be honest. Ella waited. Nicholas tapped the statement. If Central Row is worth what I think, a sale could clear this and still leave plenty. For me. For all of us. There it is. I'm not asking for half. You asked for 10% before you knew what it was worth. I knew it was a building. You offered to protect me from a liability. I was trying not to scare you. You were trying to get me to sign before I understood it. Nicholas pressed both hands to the desk. He had spent years calling each debt temporary. The next good season would fix it. A contractor account would pay. The bank would extend the line. Charles would see the store was worth saving. Charles had helped more than once. Then, after learning the full balance, he stopped. He knew about this, Nicholas said. Grandpa? Yes. What did he say? He said he wasn't paying it. Ella looked again at the balance. When was that? About 2 years ago. The same year Charles amended the company agreement and created the trust. What did you tell him? That I wasn't asking for a gift. I wanted a loan. And? He said every loan became permission to make the same mistake again. Nicholas's face tightened as he repeated it. He could have fixed this without noticing the money was gone. Maybe he wanted you to notice. Don't talk to me like him. I'm not. Yes, you are. He got up and walked to the office window. Through the glass, the employee in the next aisle straightened a row of paint trays. If the lender calls the note, I could lose the business, Nicholas said. People work here. This isn't just me wanting a new truck. Ella believed that part. His fear was real. So was the way he had placed the solution on her desk, before asking whether the building was hers. You inherited the clock shop and the house, she said. The clock shop needs work. The house is where Dad lived, so you don't want to sell what he left you. That's different. Yes. Nicholas turned. I'm asking my daughter for help. No. You offered to handle my property for a fee. Now that I know about the debt, you're calling it help. What do you want me to say? The truth would have been good yesterday. I'm telling you now. Because I said no. Ella placed the statement back in the folder. I'm not making a decision until Kelsey finishes. Nicholas looked toward the folder, but didn't pick it up. How long? I don't know. I don't have forever. Neither did Grandpa. She left before he could answer. Madison called that afternoon. Can you meet me at Dad's house? She asked. Why? Hunter found information about the building. Ella almost refused. Then she remembered Kelsey's advice. A person couldn't understand pressure by avoiding every room where it appeared. Nicholas had changed nothing inside Charles's house yet. His truck filled the driveway, but he wasn't home. Madison and Hunter waited at the dining table with a laptop open between them. Lisa was not there. Hunter turned the screen toward Ella. A map showed the Spring Street parcel outlined in blue. I pulled comparable sales, he said. There's interest in that area. From who? Developers, small investment groups. Did you tell them about Central Row? I asked general questions. Madison gave him a look that said his general questions had been more specific than that. Hunter continued. The building may be worth several $100,000, maybe more, depending on the rents and condition. You don't know the rents. Allison does. Did you call her? No, Madison said quickly. Hunter didn't answer. Ella sat across from them. What do you want? Madison folded her hands. We want to avoid a family fight by selling the building, by finding out what it's worth. I have a lawyer doing that. A lawyer isn't a broker, Hunter said. And you're not my broker. His smile held for half a second, then disappeared. Madison moved the laptop aside. This affects all of us, Ella. Dad gave Nicholas the shop and house. He divided his savings between the rest of us. If he owned another property, it should have been discussed. It was put in a separate trust. So you keep saying, I said it once. To Nicholas. He told me. There it was. Nicholas's honesty lasted until it became inconvenient to keep something private. Madison looked around the dining room. Charles's place at the table was still empty. I spent years hearing how close you were to him, she said. Every family dinner, every holiday. Ella knows this. Ella helped with that. Ella understands the shop. I didn't ask him to compare us. He didn't have to. Everybody else did it for him. Hunter touched her wrist. Madison pulled away. If he left you a building worth that much, what does that say about the rest of us? Ella understood then that money wasn't the whole injury for Madison. A private building made Charles's judgment public in the one language Madison trusted. Ownership, value, something other people could measure. You think selling it changes what he said? Ella asked. It turns it into something fair. How? We divide the proceeds, among people already named in the will, among his family. Hunter reopened the laptop. I can approach buyers quietly. If you sign an exclusive agreement, I'll reduce my commission. To what? 4%. On a property worth several $100,000, his reduced commission would still be more than most people earned in a year. Ella stood. I'm not signing anything. Madison's voice followed her. You always got the part of Dad none of us could reach. Ella turned at the doorway. No, I got the hours nobody else wanted. Madison looked away first. 2 days later, Kelsey called. The county deed matches. The company filing is active. The notary's commission was valid when the trust was signed, and both witnesses have confirmed their signatures. Ella gripped the phone. So, it's real. The documents are authentic. We still need to complete your acceptance as successor trustee, but yes, the structure is real. Can I read the letter? You can. They met at Kelsey's office with Allison and Jonathan present. Kelsey brought the original envelope from the cabinet and laid it before Ella. Ella opened it along the edge. Charles's letter covered 4 handwritten pages. The first explained that he had bought Central Row with profits saved from the shop. He'd kept it separate because he wanted one part of his work protected from family pressure. Then he named the pressure. Nicholas had come to him repeatedly for money. Charles wrote that the hardware store debt was $85,000 the last time he saw the statements. He believed Nicholas would mortgage, pledge, or sell anything available before accepting that the business had to change. Madison wanted assets she could display, trade, or use to improve her position. Charles didn't blame her for wanting comfort. He blamed himself for taking too long to see that she measured love by what it could be made to prove. Lisa had her own inheritance. Charles wrote plainly that Central Row had never been part of it, and Ella taking the company would remove nothing from Lisa's hands. The final page was about Ella. Charles had watched her grow up around people who treated her steadiness as something they could borrow. He didn't want her future used to rescue every person who arrived with a family claim. He hadn't hidden Central Row because he was ashamed of it. He had hidden it until the transfer was safe. Ella read the final paragraph twice. The building was hers to keep or sell. Charles asked only that she look closely before deciding, speak to Allison, and remember that 8 homes were not the same thing as one price. At the bottom, he had written one last line. I left the others what they expected, but I left you what I trusted you to understand. Ella kept her thumb beside the sentence until the ink blurred. Jonathan turned away to give her privacy. Allison folded her glasses and held them in both hands. Kelsey waited. After a while, Ella placed the pages on the desk. He knew the amount of Dad's debt. He saw the statements, Kelsey said, and he knew Hunter would try to sell the building. He expected pressure. That's not the same as knowing exactly what anyone would do. Ella looked at the sealed trust folder. What happens now? If you want to accept the trust, you sign an acceptance as successor trustee. Then we update the company records and the bank authority. And if I don't? The trust document names a professional backup trustee. The property would still be held for your benefit, but someone else would make the decisions. Charles had given her a way to refuse without losing everything. That detail mattered. He hadn't built a trap and called it a gift. I'll accept, she said. Kelsey didn't hand her a pen immediately. You're taking responsibility for an occupied property. That means taxes, insurance, repairs, leases, and fair treatment of the tenants. It also means no one can sell or borrow against the company without your authority once the records are updated. I understand. You understand the sentence. The work will take longer. Allison can teach me. Allison looked at her. I can teach you the building. I can't decide what you want it to become. I'm not asking you to. That was enough for Kelsey. She prepared the acceptance document. Ella signed her name beneath a paragraph, stating that she accepted the duties of successor trustee under the terms Charles had established. Kelsey notarized it, then made certified copies. The next several days were less dramatic than finding a building behind a clock face. They were also what made the discovery usable. Ella went with Kelsey to the county office and watched a clerk pull the recorded deed. The stamped copy matched the one from the locked drawer, including a faint mark near the lower corner, where the original page had fed crookedly through the recorder. The state filing showed Central Row Holdings in good standing. Kelsey submitted the change, naming Ella as the company's authorized manager through the trust. The insurance company added her contact information without changing the policy. At the bank, Janice compared Ella's identification with the trust documents and the notarized acceptance. Lisa's name wasn't mentioned. Nicholas's name wasn't mentioned. Madison's name wasn't mentioned. Janice removed Charles as the active signer and added Ella beside Allison. You'll both have authority for normal operating expenses, she said. A sale or loan would require trust documentation and Ella's approval. Allison looked at Ella. There's your answer. The operating account held rent money, repair reserves, and security deposits that belonged to tenants. Kelsey made sure Ella understood each category. "You can't treat this as personal cash," she said. "I wasn't planning to. Many people don't plan to until they see the balance." Ella ordered no debit card for herself. She asked the bank to require 2 approvals for transfers above ordinary repair amounts. Allison noticed. Charles didn't require that. "I'm not Charles." "No." Allison smiled slightly. "You answer faster." They spent an afternoon in the manager's office going through the rent ledger. 7 apartments were occupied. One upstairs unit had been empty since its tenant moved closer to family. The rents were below what newer buildings charged. Central Row made a steady profit because Charles had bought it without a mortgage and kept expenses controlled. Allison showed Ella the maintenance schedule. Roof was replaced 6 years ago. Water heaters are mixed ages. 2 will need replacing soon. The rear stairs need another coat before summer. And Carol's wall? Dry now. The contractor can close it tomorrow. Ella approved the repair from the company account. It was the first decision she made as trustee. Nobody applauded. Carol got her wall back, and the company paid a fair invoice. That was what ownership looked like on an ordinary Thursday. The first sign of Hunter's interference came from a business card. Allison found 3 of them pushed beneath apartment doors. Hunter's photograph appeared in one corner, above the words Property Solutions and Investment Sales. On the back, he'd written, "Call to discuss possible relocation payment." Ella read the card at the office desk. Did he speak to anyone? Carol said he knocked yesterday afternoon. He told her the building might be sold for redevelopment. "I haven't decided to sell. He didn't say you had. He wanted them to think it." Allison took out her phone. "One tenant called me, worried that a new owner would end his lease. Another asked whether she should start looking for somewhere else." Ella called Hunter. He answered cheerfully. "Hey, Ella, I was going to call you. Stop contacting the tenants. I gave them information. You gave them your card. They have a right to know there may be a change. There is no change. Not yet. You don't represent me or Central Row. I represent potential interest." "In what?" "The property. It isn't listed. Buyers don't always wait for listings." Ella placed the call on speaker. Allison sat across from her, writing down the time. "Who have you contacted?" Ella asked. "I've made a few quiet inquiries. Give me the names. I can't disclose private conversations. You used my property to start them. Your ownership hasn't been established in court. It doesn't need to be established in court. The trust owns the company. That's Kelsey's opinion. It's also the county record." Hunter's voice lost some of its warmth. "You're making this harder than it has to be." "No, I'm telling you to stop. What if I bring you a serious offer? I won't consider anything you arrange without my permission. That would be emotional, not financial. Don't contact another tenant." She ended the call. Allison pushed the pad toward her. She had written the date, time, and the main points of the conversation. "Keep the cards too," she said. A second call came before lunch. The man introduced himself as Thomas Martinez, a commercial real estate broker. "I was given your number by Kelsey Phillips," he said. Ella looked at Allison. "What do you need?" "To tell you that your uncle by marriage approached me about selling Central Row. He isn't my uncle." There was a brief pause. "Your aunt's husband, then?" "He doesn't have authority." "That's why I'm calling." Thomas asked to meet at the building. He arrived in a dark sedan and carried a leather folder that had been repaired with black tape near the handle. He didn't resemble Hunter's business card. There was no photograph of him on anything. They sat in the empty upstairs apartment with Kelsey and Allison. The rooms had been cleaned, but not repainted. Afternoon light showed every mark on the walls where furniture had once stood. Thomas opened his folder. "Hunter contacted me 4 days ago. He said a family-owned apartment property might become available before probate ended." "Central Row isn't in probate," Kelsey said. "I know that now." He handed her printed copies of 2 emails. In the first, Hunter described himself as representing family interests connected to the estate. In the second, he asked Thomas to identify developers willing to make a quick offer before the owner retained separate representation. Ella read that line again. "He knew I had Kelsey. He knew you were getting advice," Thomas said. "He hoped to create an offer before your position was settled. Did you contact buyers?" "I reviewed the property records first. The title showed Central Row Holdings. Then I checked the company filing and saw it had just been updated through a trust. That didn't match what Hunter told me. So you called Kelsey?" "Yes. Thomas wasn't there, only as a favor. A legitimate sale could bring him business later. He was clear about that. "If you ever choose to list, I'd like to be considered," he said. "But I won't shop a building for someone who can't sign for it." Kelsey placed the emails in her folder. "Would you confirm how you received these if needed?" "Yes." Thomas had already reviewed Central Row's rent roll, expenses, tax history, and recent sales nearby. With Ella's written permission, he arranged a formal inspection and independent appraisal. The inspection took most of a day. A roofing contractor checked the flashing and gutters. An electrician opened panels in every unit. The appraiser measured the building, photographed the vacant apartment, and compared the rents with similar properties. Ella walked with them. She heard what needed work instead of waiting for a final number. The rear stair rail was sound but below newer height standards. One electrical panel would need replacement within a year. The sagging gutter had damaged a strip of trim. None of it made the building unsafe or unmanageable. A week later, Thomas returned with the report. They met in the manager's office. Jonathan came because he'd been keeping the discovery photographs and wanted to hear what the building meant outside family guesses. Thomas placed the appraisal on the desk. "The concluded market value is $740,000. Jonathan stopped turning the clock screw he'd carried in his pocket. Allison sat back. Ella looked first at the number, then at the pages behind it. Income, expenses, comparable buildings, necessary repairs, vacancy assumptions. The value wasn't a promise that someone would pay that amount tomorrow. It was a supported professional opinion of what the property was worth as an operating apartment building. "Clean title?" Ella asked. "Yes." "The deed history is straightforward. No mortgage, no recorded liens, no competing owner. And the trust?" "Kelsey can answer the legal part. From a transaction standpoint, the company is the titled owner, and you are now the authorized person for that company through the trust." Kelsey added the certified deed, company record, bank authorization, appraisal, Hunter's emails, and Allison's written account of the tenant contacts to one indexed file. Jonathan contributed the original photographs of the clock before the dial was removed. He wrote a short statement describing the mismatched screw, the recessed panel, and the condition of the lease and note when they came out. "The clock itself matters," Kelsey said. "I still have every removed part," Jonathan told her. "Nothing's been altered except the movement repair. Keep the dial off for now." Ella looked at him. "Can it run without the dial?" "On a test stand. It won't look like a clock, but it can keep time." At his shop, Jonathan had already replaced the worn bushing and cleaned every pivot. The movement ran beneath a glass cover while he measured its gain and loss each day. Ella visited that evening. The gears moved with a soft, regular sound. The clock's hands weren't attached, and its face still rested on the padded tray. Behind it, the shallow cavity remained visible. Jonathan handed her a fresh timing sheet. "Lost 12 seconds the first day. 4 the second. It gained 1 today. So it's fixed? It's getting there." Ella's phone rang. Kelsey's name appeared on the screen. "I've received a request from the lawyer handling Charles's probate," she said. "Nicholas and Madison want a family meeting at the clock shop. They're claiming the Spring Street property should be brought into the estate. Do they know about the appraisal?" "Not from me. When is the meeting?" "Monday morning." Ella watched the repaired movement turn beneath the glass. "Tell them I'll be there." Monday morning, the open sign was already lit when Ella arrived. Nicholas had arranged 6 folding chairs in front of Charles's workbench. He'd moved the customer clocks from the nearest shelf and cleared a space on the counter for papers and coffee. The shop belonged to him now, and he wanted the room to show it. Madison sat beside Hunter. Lisa had taken the chair nearest the front window. The probate lawyer stood behind the counter with a folder under one arm. Allison waited near the back room door. Jonathan came in behind Ella and locked his own tool case beneath the bench. The regulator clock remained at his shop, with its dial off and the movement still running on the test stand. Kelsey entered last. "Is this a settlement meeting?" she asked. The probate lawyer glanced at Nicholas. "The family asked for an informal discussion before anyone takes further action. Then, nothing said. Here is confidential, unless we all agree that it is." Nicholas spread his hands. "We're family. We shouldn't need rules for talking." Kelsey took the chair beside Ella. Rules help families talk. Nicholas didn't like her tone, but he smiled as if he did. He remained standing while everyone else sat. I called this meeting because Dad's property needs to be handled fairly, he began. We've learned there was an apartment building that wasn't included in the will. An apartment building owned by a company, Kelsey said. Nicholas looked at her. I'd like to finish. Go ahead. He placed one hand on Charles's bench. The gesture bothered Ella more than the words. Charles had never allowed anyone to lean on that section while a movement was open. Nicholas knew it. He'd forgotten because the bench had become furniture to him. We all sat in a lawyer's office and accepted Dad's wishes, he said. Nobody fought over the house, the shop, or the savings. Then a hidden leash showed up in a clock. Ella didn't hide it, Jonathan said. I didn't say she did. You made it sound that way. Nicholas kept his eyes on Ella. She found papers nobody else knew existed. Those papers supposedly remove a valuable property from the estate and give it to one person. Not supposedly, Allison said. Nicholas turned toward her. You're the only person claiming Dad had this plan. The documents claim it. Documents you kept in your office. Because Charles put them there. So you say. Allison sat straighter. Ella touched her arm before she answered. It was the first part of Kelsey's advice. Let them state the argument they were willing to defend. The probate lawyer placed a hand on Nicholas's papers. We should keep this orderly. I am being orderly, Nicholas said. Hunter opened his laptop. We've prepared a practical option. Ella looked at him but said nothing. Hunter turned the screen so everyone could see a photograph of Central Row. The property can be sold. The proceeds can be held until ownership is resolved. That prevents further expense and protects the value. Protects it from what? Allison asked. Deferred maintenance, tenant problems, market changes. The building has operated for years, with Charles funding it. The building funds itself. Hunter clicked to another page. It showed a list of repairs, including the rear stair rail, the gutter, and the electrical panel. Ella recognized the details from the recent inspection. How did you get that? She asked. Hunter paused. Nicholas answered for him. Old buildings have common problems. That isn't a list of common problems. Those are the exact items in the inspection. Hunter closed the laptop halfway. I spoke to people familiar with the property. Who? This isn't an interrogation, Kelsey made a note. Ella let the question sit unanswered. Madison leaned forward. We're not trying to steal anything from you. What are you trying to do? Put the building where it would have been if Dad had been honest. Lisa turned from the window. Madison? What? He hid it from all of us. He was allowed to own property privately, Allison said. Not if he wasn't thinking clearly. The room changed with that sentence. Ella kept her hands in her lap. Kelsey looked at Madison. Are you alleging Charles lacked legal capacity when he signed the trust? I'm saying his health was failing. In 2023, he had problems before the diagnosis. What problems? He forgot things. What things? Madison looked at Nicholas. Nicholas took over. Appointments, names, work orders. Jonathan shook his head. No, you weren't with him all the time. Neither were you. I'm his son, and I work beside him. Nicholas stepped away from the bench. You worked for him. Then I opened my own shop. He still called me when he needed another pair of hands. That doesn't make you family. No, Jonathan said. It made me present. Madison looked down. Nicholas's face reddened. Ella could have shown them the timing. Charles had signed the trust in 2023. His heart condition wasn't diagnosed until the following year. The witnesses had confirmed their signatures. The notary had been valid. The company amendment matched the trust. She said none of it. Keep going, she told Nicholas. He stared at her. What? You asked us here? Say what you believe happened. Nicholas glanced at the probate lawyer, who gave him no rescue. I believe Dad wasn't of sound mind when those papers were signed. All of them, the trust and whatever transferred the building, the company agreement, yes. You believe Allison caused him to sign them? I believe she had access and influence. Allison's lips parted. Ella held her arm again. And me? Ella asked. What did I do? Nicholas hesitated. You spent more time with him than anyone. That's not an answer. You knew how he felt about the rest of us. Did I influence him? I don't know what you said to him. Then say that. Nicholas looked around the room. Everyone was waiting. I think Ella benefited from an arrangement made when Dad was vulnerable, he said. The probate lawyer lowered his eyes. That was the sentence Nicholas had come to deliver. He'd practiced gentler versions in the truck. He'd planned to talk about confusion, unfairness, and family unity. Under direct questions, the softer words had fallen away. Ella nodded once. Thank you. Nicholas seemed unsettled by her calm. You're acting like this is personal. You accused me of using Grandpa's illness to take a building. I said you benefited from something I didn't know existed. That's your claim. Jonathan moved in his chair, but Ella spoke before he could. Do you believe I knew about Central Row before the clock face fell loose? Nicholas looked at Allison. Yes or no? Ella asked. I don't know. Do you have evidence that I knew? No. Do you have evidence Allison influenced the trust? She managed the property. That isn't evidence. Nicholas picked up his coffee, then realized the cup was empty. Hunter reopened the laptop. This is getting emotional. The point is that a sale gives everyone room to resolve the dispute. Have you found a buyer? Kelsey asked. I've identified interest. Through Thomas Martinez? Hunter's hand stopped on the keyboard. Nicholas looked at him. You said you had other people, Madison said quietly. I made several contacts. Did Thomas give you the inspection report? Ella asked. Hunter closed the laptop again. I'm not discussing client communications. Thomas isn't your client, Kelsey said. Hunter stood. I don't have to sit here and be accused of doing my job. You weren't hired, Ella said. Madison reached for his hand. He didn't take it. Nicholas pulled a document from his folder. We're wasting time. He placed it on the counter. The heading read, Objection to exclusion of estate asset and petition for probate review. Ella read only the first paragraph from where she sat. It claimed Central Row Holdings had been concealed from the general estate. It questioned Charles's capacity and asked the court to stop any sale, transfer, or change in control until ownership was decided. You already had it prepared, Lisa said. We needed to be ready. You told me this was a conversation. It is. You brought something for us to sign. Nicholas turned the pages toward her. This protects all our interests. Lisa didn't reach for it. My savings were already distributed, partly. The estate is still open. Does Ella taking Central Row reduce my share? Nicholas looked toward the probate lawyer. The lawyer answered carefully. If the trust is valid, Central Row was never part of the probate estate. It would not change the portion you received. And if it isn't valid, the building could be added to the estate and distributed according to the remaining terms of the will. Lisa looked at Ella. So, she isn't taking something that was given to me. No, Kelsey said. She is not. Nicholas interrupted. That isn't the point. It's my point. Madison picked up the petition. Lisa, if we don't challenge now, we may lose the right. How long do we have? The objection must be filed within 90 days of the will reading, the probate lawyer said. There were still weeks left, but Nicholas behaved as if the courthouse would close at noon. He placed a pen beside Lisa. You don't have to accuse anybody. Just join the request for review. The document already named Nicholas and Madison as objectors. A separate line allowed Lisa to join as an interested beneficiary. Lisa read the capacity claim. I didn't see Charles sign these papers. Neither did we, Madison said. That's why we need a judge to look at it. Allison spoke for the first time since Ella had stopped her. I saw him put the document box in my office. He knew exactly what he was doing. Nicholas pointed at her. And you stand to keep your job if Ella gets the building. Allison's face went still. There was the second complete commitment. Nicholas wasn't only questioning Charles. He was saying everyone who confirmed Charles's plan had been bought by it. Ella let the silence stay. Then she asked, Are you filing this, whether Lisa signs or not? Yes. Are you asking the court to find Grandpa lacked capacity in 2023? Yes. Are you claiming the building belonged in the probate estate? Yes. And you're authorizing every statement in that petition? Nicholas pulled the pen toward him. Yes. He signed. Madison signed beneath him. Hunter stood behind her chair, watching the ink dry. Lisa held the pen but didn't use it. I want my own lawyer to read this, she said. Nicholas exhaled sharply. Fine. She placed the pen down. The probate lawyer gathered the petition. Once this is filed, the court will set a hearing. Informal discussion won't be enough after that. That's what we want, Nicholas said. Ella looked at Madison. Is it? Madison glanced at Hunter, then at Nicholas's signature. Yes. Kelsey closed her legal pad. We'll respond after filing. Nicholas frowned. That's all you have to say? for now. He had expected Kelsey to argue. He'd expected Ella to show the papers, reveal a weakness, or offer a share to stop the petition. They gave him nothing. The meeting ended when the first customer tried the front door and found it locked. Nicholas went to open it. As Ella put on her coat, she noticed Charles's old magnifying visor still hanging above the bench. Nicholas had cleared shelves, moved chairs, and claimed the room for his accusation. He hadn't noticed the one tool that would have helped him see more closely. Outside, Kelsey stopped beside Ella's car. "I'll get the filed copy this afternoon." "Then what?" "We prepare for the hearing." Everything they just chose to challenge. Ella looked through the shop window. Nicholas stood behind the counter, speaking to a customer as though the morning had gone exactly as planned. The proof remained where he couldn't reach it. 3 weeks later, Nicholas entered the probate courtroom, carrying the same folder he'd placed on Charles's bench. Madison and Hunter sat beside him. Lisa took the end seat, leaving a small gap between herself and the others. Ella sat with Kelsey. Allison, Thomas, and Jonathan waited behind them. Jonathan had brought the regulator clock in a padded wooden carrier. Its repaired movement was secured inside the case, but the dial remained off. The judge reviewed the objection first. Nicholas Stevens and Madison Stevens Roberts contend that Central Row holdings should be included in Charles Stevens's probate estate, she said. They also question his capacity when the separate trust documents were executed. Is that correct? Nicholas stood. Yes, Your Honor. And you wish to proceed with both claims? Yes. Madison answered more quietly. Yes. The judge looked at Lisa. You haven't signed the objection. I wanted to hear the evidence first. That's your right. Nicholas sat down. His confidence lasted through the first few minutes. The probate lawyer described Charles as an older man with worsening health who had concealed a valuable asset from his family. He argued that the secrecy itself suggested confusion or improper influence. Then Kelsey stood. Charles signed the trust and amended company agreement in 2023, she said. His heart condition was diagnosed the following year. The deed has been recorded since 2010. Nothing about the property's ownership was hidden from the county, the state, the bank, or the tax authorities. She handed certified copies to the court. The notary's commission was valid. Both witnesses have confirmed their signatures. Central Row Holdings remains the recorded owner of the building. The trust has held Charles's company interests since 2023, and Ella Stevens is the named successor trustee and sole beneficiary. The judge turned to Nicholas. Do you have medical evidence that your father lacked capacity in 2023? Nicholas looked at his lawyer. No medical record from that year, the lawyer said. We have family observations. What observations? Madison testified first. She described Charles forgetting a lunch date and calling her twice about the same birthday gift. Under Kelsey's questions, Madison admitted the lunch date had been changed by text. Charles had called twice because Hunter answered the first time and never passed along the message. Nicholas described mistakes on shop work orders. Jonathan was called next. Did Charles make mistakes? Kelsey asked. Yes. Everyone who repairs clocks makes mistakes. Did you observe confusion affecting his business decisions? No. What did you observe in 2023? He reduced his workload. He checked his own writing twice. He asked me to take heavy movements off the wall. He was careful. Kelsey pointed toward the clock carrier. Please show the court what Ella inherited. Jonathan lifted the regulator clock onto an evidence table. Without the dial, the shallow recess was visible behind the movement frame. He explained the mismatched screw, the crooked dial plate, and the folded paper inside. Kelsey held up the lease. The night after the will, her grandfather's clock face fell loose. Behind it was the apartment contract that led Ella to Central Row Holdings. She gave the court the photographs taken before Jonathan removed anything. The document behind the clock wasn't the asset. It was a direction to a living witness. Allison took the witness chair. She described managing Central Row since 2012. She explained the locked drawer, Charles's instructions, and the promise she'd made in 2023. He told me to help whoever the clock sent, she said. Ella came with the lease and his handwritten note. I opened the drawer in front of her and Jonathan. None of us knew what those documents said until that morning. Did Ella know about Central Row before then? Kelsey asked. No. Did you pressure Charles to name her? No. Do you receive any ownership interest under the trust? No, I receive my wages for managing the building. Thomas confirmed the clean title and the appraised value of $740,000. Then Kelsey asked how he'd become involved. Thomas handed over Hunter's emails. He asked me to find a buyer before Ella obtained separate representation, he said. He described himself as representing family interests. The property record showed he had no authority. Hunter's face reddened. I was exploring options, he said from his seat. The judge looked at him. You'll speak through counsel. Lisa leaned toward the probate lawyer. If the trust stands, does it change what Charles left me? No, he whispered. Was the building ever part of my share? No. Lisa stood when the judge called her name. I withdraw any claim I may have, she said. I wanted to know whether Ella was taking something from the estate. She isn't. Nicholas stared at her, but Lisa sat without looking back. Kelsey offered Charles's notarized trust letter last. The judge read it in silence. Nicholas's debt was not proof of ownership. Madison's hurt was not proof of incapacity. Hunter's interest in a commission was not authority to arrange a sale. The judge placed the letter beside the recorded deed. The evidence shows a deliberate plan made while Charles Stevens was legally competent. Central Row Holdings belonged to the separate trust before his death. It is not an asset of the probate estate. Nicholas lowered his head. The objection is dismissed. Ella Stevens's authority as successor trustee remains in effect. No family member other than Ms. Stevens may represent the property for sale, financing, or redevelopment. The consequence was quiet and complete. Nicholas and Madison kept exactly what the will gave them. They received no part of Central Row, and their accusations changed nothing Charles had built. Outside the courtroom, Madison stopped near the stairwell. I really did think he was choosing you over us, she told Ella. He made the trust before the will. I know that now. Ella waited. Madison pressed her lips together. I'm sorry I said you influenced him. Thank you for saying it. Can we fix this? Not today. Madison nodded. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was an honest place to stop. Thomas met Ella at Central Row the following week. A developer was still willing to discuss an offer near the appraised value. Ella walked him through the empty upstairs apartment. Fresh paint covered the old furniture marks. The windows had been resealed. In Carol's apartment below, the repaired wall was dry and solid. I'm not listing it, Ella said. Never? Not now. The building works. People need the apartments, and I need time to learn what I'm keeping. Thomas closed his folder. That's a decision, too. Allison remained manager. Ella approved the electrical panel replacement and the rear stair work. She didn't raise the rents to match the newest buildings nearby. She set aside a larger repair reserve and wrote a plain emergency contact sheet that every tenant received. Nicholas took longer to approach her. He came to Central Row one evening after the hardware store closed. I met with the lender, he said. Ella waited beside the office door. They'll restructure part of the debt if I sell excess inventory and close one department. That sounds hard. It is. He looked toward the lobby wall, where Jonathan had marked a place for the regulator clock. I kept expecting Dad to save the store. He knew. I know. Nicholas rubbed his hands together. I can't give you 10% of anything. No? He almost smiled. Then he offered something useful. He didn't know how to run Stevens' clock and watch repair. Jonathan did. Nicholas agreed to lease the Central Avenue shop to Jonathan and Ella at a fair monthly rate. He kept ownership of the building, and the rent helped him meet his revised payments. Jonathan moved his business into the old shop. Ella handled the accounts and worked beside him several afternoons a week. They kept the original name on the window. Charles's bench stayed where it had always been. The regulator clock took another month to finish. Jonathan reset the dial with the correct screws, but left the hidden recess intact. Ella placed copies of the lease and Charles's note inside it. The originals remained protected with Kelsey. They carried the clock into Central Row together. Allison held the ladder. Carol watched from her doorway. Lisa brought the peppermint jar and placed it on the lobby table beneath the clock. Jonathan hung the case on a new steel bracket. Better than the old nail, he said. Ella attached the pendulum and gave it one careful push. The movement caught. The hands passed 8 minutes after 4, the time where they'd been stopped for years, and continued forward. If stories about young people rebuilding a life after family betrayal matter to you, subscribe and return for the next inheritance story. That evening, Ella turned off the manager's office light and stood in the lobby while the clock marked the hour. Its chime was warm and a little lower than she remembered. Outside, Nicholas's truck slowed near the building. He looked through the glass, saw the clock moving, and continued down Spring Street. Ella locked the front entrance, checked the repair notice beside Carol's door, and set the peppermint jar straight beneath the clock. The pendulum crossed the window's reflection back and forth, while 8 front doors closed softly on people coming home.